Hello, everyone, and welcome to Bigfoot Uncensored. Today, we're heading to one of the most remote places in America, the Alaska tundra, a place where the land is vast, the nights are long, and the stories passed down through generations are as real to the people who live there as the snow beneath their feet. Today's episode dives into the documentary Blood and Myth, a haunting blend of true crime and indigenous folklore. Blood and Myth follows a chilling true story from the remote Iñupiat region of northwest Alaska. At the center of it all is Teddy Kyle Smith, a talented actor, a respected community member, and eventually a man at the heart of a violent and deeply unsettling mystery. In 2012, Smith attacked two hunters out on the tundra. They survived, but the incident sent shockwaves through the small community. When authorities finally caught up with Smith, he claimed something extraordinary. He said he wasn't acting alone. He insisted he had encountered iñukuns, small mythical beings from Iñupiat lore, and that these beings influenced his actions. The documentary is guided by storyteller James Dominic Jr., who takes us on a journey through both the facts of the case and the cultural mythology surrounding it. Dominic doesn't just investigate what happened, he explores how indigenous stories, identity, and belief systems shape the way people understand the world around them. Blood and Myth doesn't try to convince you that supernatural beings are real. Instead, it asks a deeper question. How do myths live inside us? And what happens when trauma, isolation, and cultural memory collide? Ultimately, the legal system rejected Smith's explanations. He was convicted and sentenced to 99 years in prison. But the documentary leaves us with something more complicated than a simple true crime narrative. It's a story about culture, belief, and the power of story. The ones we inherit, the ones we fear, and the ones we tell ourselves. If you're drawn to true crime with a psychological and cultural edge, Blood and Myth is a haunting look at the intersection of reality and legend in one of the most remote corners of America. Now, since I got that out of the way, I can talk to you about this film. I did watch it. I thought it was very interesting. What I didn't find out from the documentary, though, was how these Iñukuns supposedly influenced Teddy to commit these crimes. That's not clear, and I've done a little research on that, and it's not clear to me. It's just that he claims that he was under their influence, but did they really tell him to do this? But if you watch the documentary, the way the story unfolds leads me to my own conclusion. Now, this Teddy guy, he was a well-respected guy in his community. He had made a movie. It was called something about Last Men on the Ice or Inuits on the Ice or something like that. So he's kind of a well-known guy. But that movie was made, I think, in their mid-2000s or something. But he got fame from that. But it's also claimed that he had a severe drinking problem as well, which may have contributed to this. But in a nutshell, here's how the story goes. Teddy wakes up one morning after a hard night of drinking. He passed out or blacked out. He wakes up, he's in his mother's house, and he finds that she is deceased. Doesn't know how, whatever. It's not clear, but the fact of the matter that she's deceased. And then he doesn't know how to deal with that shit, so he flips out, grabs a bunch of gear, and by this time, somebody knows that there's some issue at the house. Then it's alleged he takes a shot at somebody, and then he just hauls ass into the woods. Takes off into the tundra, takes off into the Alaskan wilderness. And then he's running around up there for like 5 days or whatever, and he made it like 40 miles or something, and then finds this remote cabin on this river, right? And so he's been dicking around for like 4 or 5 days. He finds this cabin. He breaks into the cabin, and he's there overnight in the cabin. And then the next day or whatever, these two hunters show up. And like he's really nervous because, he's on the run. His mother had died or whatever, and he's been out in the woods for 5 days and shit. So anyways, these dudes show up, and for some reason, he gets all paranoid. So he tries to kill them. He shoots both of them and then runs away with their gear and took their boat and went back down the river. But they never died. It is kind of miraculous. They were able to call for help. They were rescued. And then they knew they were looking for Teddy at this point, and then subsequently he's captured. And they arrest him and for attempted murder and whatnot. But there is an investigation done in his mother's death, and it was like unexplained, but it wasn't like he did it. I think he thinks he did it. That's why he went bananas and took off into the Alaska wilderness. Anyways, long and short of it, so he goes to trial for this attempted murder of these two hunters, and that's where he makes his claim that he may have been influenced by these Iñukuns, right? These Iñukuns, but you have to understand just who these Iñukuns are. So I'm going to read you a description here that I got. Okay, who are the Iñukuns? The Iñukuns are a small, mysterious being from Iñupiat mythology, often described as child-sized people who live out on the tundra, far from villages. In traditional stories, they're known for being elusive, fast, and unpredictable. Some tales portray them as helpers or protectors, while others warn that they can be tricksters who mislead travelers or lure people away from safety. They're not monsters, they're more like little spirit people, existing in that space between the physical world and the unseen. For many Inupiaq people, these stories aren't just folklore. They're part of a cultural understanding of the land, the dangers of isolation, and the belief that the world is full of forces we can't always see. Once again, in Blood and Myth, Teddy Kyle claims he encountered these beings, which becomes a central and unsettling part of the documentary's exploration of the myth, trauma, and belief. So that's what the Iñukuns are. But it's never clear how they influenced him to do anything. That's one of the reasons I think this story's kind of bullshit, and I think it's more liquor talking than anything else, because they bring up the Iñukuns, but there's never a clear statement made about how they influenced him to do anything, or how are they relevant to this story. I don't get it. But anyways, you have to check it out. Now, I personally have been to Alaska a number of times, and I've been out in some remote ass places. I will tell you, I've been out to Portlock, Port Chatham, Alaska 2 times, and I will tell you that is one of the strangest places I've ever been, especially given the legends about the Nantinaq, the hairy man, all the mysterious deaths and all that kind of crap that you hear about. That was probably the freakiest place I've ever been to, but there's no talk of Iñukuns or anything, just the Nantinaq. Sometimes when I'm up there in these remote areas, you can just feel like you're insignificant and you're in this expanse. Dude, it does. It just if you've never been to Alaska, go out in the middle of nowhere and you will feel like the sense of isolation and just the sense of remoteness and stuff. It's a weird feeling, and I think some people, I don't think they can deal with it. I've driven the Dalton Highway up to Prudhoe Bay a couple of times now. I've traveled out to a lot of areas, remote areas of Alaska, and sometimes that space just just too much wide open space. The first time I ever heard of anything about these so-called little people was at a Bigfoot convention back around 2017, 2018. That was the first time I've ever heard about little people. And the gentleman that was, he was a presenter at the Bigfoot conference there. And at his table, he had a number of track castings, and then he had these little miniature ones, which looked like little baby Bigfoot tracks. And I said, "What the hell are those?" And he said, "Well, those are little people tracks." And I'm like, "Little people?" And then he's telling me the story about little people, which the story is similar to this Iñukuns, but they're allegedly little Bigfoot. And I said, "Where the hell did you get these?" And he goes, "Mount Rainier." So evidently, there's little people running around on Mount Rainier. But as I recall, He said he's like a mini me Sasquatch, like a little miniature version of Sasquatch, little hairy guy. Up on Vancouver Island, they talk about Buckwist being a little trickster guy. So I guess he'd be kind of like an Inukid because he's supposed to be a small little dude too. In closing, let me know your thoughts about the film. Also, let me know if you've had any encounter with these little people before, or possibly Bigfoot or anything like that, any of these cryptids when you've been out in the woods or heard of any good stories. That's all the time we have today. Have a great weekend. We'll see you next week.